So
yeah,
as a co-host,
you're recording now. You're recording. I can see you're recording right now.
That's great.
Okay, so request you just stop it now. There will be no point, and we'll start recording once you start the session.
Yeah, good to go.
Okay, perfect. I think we're good to go. It's a 60-minute or a 90-minute session. How are you planning this, Marcelo? Just confirming.
Oh, it could be both, really. I planned for 90 minutes, but I have lots of stories mentioned in the presentation, and each story could just be developed. So if we kind of fall short, I can always go back and say, hey, let me tell you about when I faced this challenge and my thoughts about it.
Perfect. I think it sounds great. I think we're good to go. I recommend that we keep both our screens off for the next minute as we let people in, and then we can open it if that's all right with you.
Sure.
Okay, and then we get them in. Nishit, how is your net connection today? Can't hear you. Your volume is not coming in properly.
Sir, it was good.
It's good to go, right? All right. I'm making you co-host as a backup in case something happens. Then you are there as a backup co-host. I'll make one more person co-host after that. Nishit, just ask everyone to join in, please. ASAP. Thank you. Nishit, you have co-hosting rights?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm just going for a quick call for 30 seconds. So just allow, please ask everyone else to, as they keep coming in, just allow them inside. You know how to do that, right? Just do that. Thank you. Dhruv Rana, are you there? Dhruv, are you there?
Yes, sir, very much here.
I'm making you a co-host as a backup. You and Nishit are co-host. In case my network has an issue, then you will be continuing with the thing.
All right, sir. No issues.
Nishit or Dhruv, one of you, please do a recording also of the same. All right, so
All right,
share on Google link later in case there's an issue. That's why.
Okay, sir.
We will start exactly in 1 minute's time. I would request that if anyone is not there right now, please ask them to join ASAP. All right. Our speaker is already here. So 1 minute now. Please ask everyone to join in ASAP. Okay, everyone, request everyone to kindly switch on the cameras. Thank you so much. Marcelo, you're on mute. Can't hear you. Just confirming once.
Yeah, joining in now.
Yeah, I can hear you now. Thank you so much. Everyone, kindly switch on your cameras. Let's start the session, please. Mr. Ladda, Mr. Gurung, Ms. Singh, Ms. Kumar, Mr. Mitra. Can we kindly have a presence now? Thank you. Very grateful. Then, Mr. Ladda, you can't run away this time. You better have your camera on. Anjali Kumar, nice to see you. Yeah. All right. Marcelo, can we have your camera on, please? We can start. We are ready to start. So I'll just do an introduction.
Everybody.
All right.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Marcelo.
Good afternoon, sir.
What I will do is I'm just going to put first, Marcelo, what we'll do is I'll just give a small introduction to you from what I know about you. And I'm sure there's just 1/100th of what there is to know about you. So please take it with a pinch of salt, everyone. And then after that, I will hand over the reins of the entire show to Marcelo. And I will put you on spotlight, Marcelo, so that then we can take it forward. All right. Everyone has, I have started recording. Have others people started recording? Just confirming once. Are people recording the meeting?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, confirm. Recording is happening.
Yes, sir.
Just confirming. Okay, great. Perfect. So I think then we can start. Nishit and Dhruv, just as a backup, you are co-hosts. In case I do log off for some reason, please make sure that you are there. So please have the recording also on with both of you. And as usual, please take screenshots, etc., and take it forward from there. You know the works. Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Now, without much ado, let us start. For the thing, I'm sure some people will be joining in, Marcelo, but they, you know how people are. They just keep joining in. So let's start the entire session as it is. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to all of you, and good morning to Marcelo from where he is in Geneva in Switzerland. You know, of course, he can also be in space with the background, but yes, right now he's in Geneva in Switzerland, and I'm sure he'll tell you some of his space associated stories also later. I've known Marcelo for some time, and I must tell you, it's actually so interesting to know someone so interesting as Marcelo. And if you all know that if someone like me is saying that, then he must really be a very, very interesting person. They say our life is just a sum of our stories, all right? And if that was a measure to maintain a, you know, to measure a rich and interesting life, then I'm sure Marcelo is by far the richest person in this room right now, because he's had such great stories, and I hope some of those are those which you can share with us today. And those stories are not just stories; they are personal experiences. You know, having worked with some of the largest companies in the world in consulting, such as Accenture. Some of you may know of Accenture as a company, I'm hoping, all right, to having tested the limit of endurance by going through fast, some of it which is in the write-up, a 100-day fast culminating in a 50-day fast, to working with the United Nations in making better cities and the environment, to actively taking part as invited to the World Economic Forum, to climbing Mont Blanc, which is the highest mountain in the Alps, just after he finished a 50-day fast, which trust me is a very, very interesting thing as it is, even if you don't fast. And I think probably, he actually obviously is the founder of neoway.com and the Wisdom Accelerator for Youth, which is there to accelerate the growth, development, and startup culture among very, very talented young people, typically in the teenage years across the world. I've had the privilege of being a guest speaker, of course, in the Accelerator for Youth, and it's been a wonderful experience. And of course, Marcelo is also someone who's closely associated with leadership training. And the biggest challenge, of course, which he has, and his biggest achievement, is that he's the father of a teenage daughter, which I think is I think the biggest achievement that he has, and he'll agree with me over there. All right. But anyway, you know me, if I get to speak, I can keep going on and speaking. So enough about me. You're not coming to hear about me. You come here to hear about Marcelo. So Marcelo, it's a privilege, it's a pleasure, and it's an honor to welcome you today, sir, for a keynote session. And the floor, or in this case, the entire screen, is all yours.
Well, the whole space, really, I can take over this thing. You guys stay on Earth, and hopefully you can join me in space pretty soon. I thank you already for the invitation, and I thank you again. This is a great privilege. It was remarkably relevant and useful from my perspective as well, because this is the first time I have a good reason to structure many of my thoughts, like all the things that I've done and that were well established in my mind, but how can I get this across? And prior to this, it used to be storytelling, right? I'm having a conversation and thing, and that can people can benefit
Marcelo, we're
from the
losing
same
you.
elements. So this
Okay, your net is back. We lost you for a second because of your internet, just to share with you.
Okay, so this presentation is an attempt at making sure that as many of those lessons as possible are available to more people, that they don't have to be present during those interactions. And eventually we'll be developing that into perhaps a series of lectures or inviting other people who have done also quite remarkable things. I do know many interesting people, a bit like Aditya, especially being a member of the Explorers Club in New York. Aditya surprisingly knew about it. Not many people are aware of the fact that there is a club that has been going on for 116 years that basically welcomes the craziest people in the world who have done something to advance science that includes exploration, right? So you're not going to have a Nobel Prize winner who's been in a lab the whole life. You're going to have maybe someone who hasn't won such a huge accolade, but is in a desert in Mongolia trying to discover a new species of dinosaur. And from the very beginning, Explorers Club, and this is one of the reasons why I'm dressed like Indiana Jones, and the reason why I mentioned the dinosaurs in Mongolia. So Indiana Jones was inspired by a member of the Explorers Club who was in Mongolia 100 years ago trying to figure out what kind of dinosaurs they had over there. And apparently he was a very colorful character. I'm not sure about the whip and shooting people and in the fighting scenes, probably not part of his background, surely not in his CV from what I can tell. But I wanted to kind of take my hat off to all the explorers in the world that have done so much for us to understand the limits of human capabilities. So other members of the Explorers Club were in fact the first persons to reach the North Pole, the South Pole, the top of the Everest, the bottom of the ocean, and I actually met him. He's still alive. So he went to the Marianas Trench in 1960. It's called Don Walsh, and he's still speaking at conferences. We met at the Global Exploration Summit. And the final point is that every single person who ever walked on the moon is also a member of the Explorers Club. So my benchmark in terms of the people who are my peers that I'm comparing myself with, they are crazy, but they're also crazy good at what they're doing. And this is really something that you should try to retain from this talk, is that try to surround yourself with people you admire. Try to give value to them so that you have a reason to keep on interacting. And in my case, of course, it took me 3 years to send the application and to get to know many people in the club so they will support me getting in as a member. But it does require effort from your side to identify, select, curate, and reach out to people who will increase your baseline, right? If you're hanging out with people who are the first ones to reach the bottom of the ocean, you play at a different level. Like your definition of impossible completely changes, right? He was in a tin can going all the way down to 11,000 meters, and there are cracking noises and there are leaks, and he just kept on going until he managed to get there because he thought that this was still within his risk boundary, and it was, right? So usually he actually jokes saying that he's not the first person to go to the bottom of the ocean. He's the first one who came back alive. Right. And this is another very important element. We'll get back to that later on, that you need to stay within your risk boundaries. What is your level of comfort? Don't just go from staying in a room doing nothing, watching Netflix and munching on chips to try to walk on the moon, right? So you have to do that in a gradual way, but make sure that you have those objectives and that you start taking steps in this direction. So we'll have that and more during the presentation. As Aditya mentioned, my background is colorful. I guess I could claim that. I was born in Rio. My grandfather was an explorer in the Amazon. So he was the guy with a machete trying to cut trails and literally exploring the jungle. My other grandfather was in fact an explorer in technology. So he was one of the first wireless telegraphists in Brazil. He was working with the Navy, and he built himself one of the first radio stations in Rio, the commercial ones, because the government had one already, back in 1935. So I had examples within my family of hardcore exploration, of getting bitten by bugs and almost losing your leg to infection, to doing something technologically extremely challenging, very far away from the centers of knowledge, right? So Rio de Janeiro back then, it's 10,000 kilometers away from New York or London, and the exchange of information was very hard. And he managed to do something that still today would be quite remarkable. So surround yourself with good examples. I got lucky, right? So it starts with the family, but I was also spending a lot of time and effort seeking people who will be allowing me to go further down that route. So start the presentation now. Let's hope that this works okay. Just give me a second. I'll get back to the first one. Yeah, so now it should be fine. Can you guys see it all good?
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Right. So if the presentation is filling the screen, this is basically to make the reference to what Aditya mentioned in his message, which is knowing thyself, right? So this could have multiple meanings, and the text on the left is in fact gnosis auton, which is know thyself in Greek, and this is critical in terms of an understanding of what you can do, your capabilities, and in many ways, you have to also keep in mind that many Greek philosophers who developed many of these concepts, they went to India to learn from your sages, and one of them is called Pyrrhus. Then they went back to Greece. So you may feel that some of those concepts that I'm describing here today, they are familiar because they're kind of recycled from India 2,500 years ago. And they're still valid today, which is why I thought it would be worth sharing them with you. So knowing thyself is a core element here. We have a few others that would kind of flesh out actionable points that you can start considering in terms of what you want to do and where you want to go. So going to the next one, this is really important. Please take some time to read this. I don't want you guys to get hurt. I'll give it like 30 seconds. Yeah, so if we're all good, basically, when I'm doing crazy things like climbing Mont Blanc by myself, yes, it's crazy, but it's crazy based on capabilities, right? So I spent 10 years of my life rock climbing in Rio. I had done solo rock climbing before, most of the time very successfully, sometimes almost killing myself in the process. But hey, no, as I usually say, I'm not very good at dying, or not for lack of trying. But many of those things that I'm doing, like eating nothing for 50 days, especially when you consider that Buddha was fasting for 49 days on his path to nirvana, it's not something that should be taken lightly, right? So especially when it's related to the fasting elements. I don't expect any of you guys here to, head up to the Himalayas and start climbing without equipment or without knowledge. But some people may think that fasting is an easy thing to do. If you have an underlying condition, heart or diabetes or whatever, this could be very, very dangerous. So you must talk to a doctor, right? So expand your knowledge, consider your possibilities, but please make sure that you do that safely. That's my disclaimer. It looks a little bit like the warning in a pack of cigarettes that is not on purpose, but actually has the same effect. So to try to make things more memorable and easier to retain, I think that we should focus in clusters of trees, right? So these are three old Greek words. Old as in they existed back in ancient Greece. And ancient Greece would be 500 BC to 200 BC, more or less. And of course, extended to Alexander the Great, who went all the way to India and then came back, and then the Romans that picked up many of those concepts. But the one thing that is quite surprising is that these words are not better known. The concepts, sometimes they are, and you recognize them immediately. But I think it's important for us to go and if you're trying to get some potatoes, you have to dig for the roots, right? So that's what I'm trying to do here, going back to the words and trying to figure out how they can have relevance in your lives. So the one on top is eudaimonia, is by far the most relevant one. And this has existed for a very, very long time. Like maybe 3,000 years ago, it was already a thing. People agreed that this was something that was important to humans. Then the last two would be phronesis. And phronesis is wisdom, but it's practical wisdom. It's like knowing that you shouldn't stick a finger in a socket because you get a shock, right? And that's just a silly example because it worked even with toddlers. But phronesis are life hacks, stuff that you learn along your way that is really hard to teach. Like people have to experience those things. And it makes, as a group of experiences, it makes you better prepared to make better decisions in the future, right? So phronesis, it's not a fancy word, but it's highly relevant. And there are books written about it. They're usually called practical wisdom. And the last one is ataraxia, which means calm in front of challenges, right? So one of the greatest reasons why people fail when they try to achieve something, like literally yesterday, I only had a few hours to prepare this presentation. Everything was in my mind, but I had way too many elements that I wanted to put in there. And I go like, how can I structure this? How can I make sure that people who haven't been exposed to any of those concepts as much as I have, they have a chance at understanding it and consolidating those thoughts and applying them to their lives. So I was feeling, and through meditation and fasting, I can recognize my feelings better than I used to before. And I was feeling anxiety. It's like, oh my God, can I actually get a good presentation before the deadline? I want to make sure that I have my friends who know me and heard some of the stories reviewing it as well, to get the highest possible quality to the audience. And because I recognized this feeling of anxiety, it was almost like I was outside my own body looking at me as this highly anxious person, and then saying, oh, wow, no, this is what's going on with this guy. Well, how can I help him? No, I can help him by just taking a breath, understanding that what is the worst thing that could happen? Well, I can spend 90 minutes telling stories, and you guys would be amused because I have some fairly interesting stories. Like we get back to that later. I actually have a LinkedIn post describing how Turkish soldiers were shooting at me near the Syrian border by mistake, and I had to be, detained. They checked that I was not a smuggler, and then they offered me tea to apologize. And we're like, okay, no, and this story could last 20 minutes, but literally, I'm visiting a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Soldiers start shooting at me, and 15 minutes later, they're offering me tea and asking if I'm okay. Like, this is an amusing story. I have many of those. Right? So I will get back to that point later. I have a draft of a book called 13 Ways to Almost Die, because on 13 occasions in my life, I was very close to dying. By half a meter, by half a second, I didn't, which is why I joke saying that I'm not very good at dying. But I do have lots of stories that I can tell, meaning, what is the worst thing that could happen? I would just pretend that we're sitting here, and this is Aditya's living room. There's coffee and cookies and tea, and you guys are just sitting there, and I'm talking to friends, sharing some stories and having a laugh. Like, this presentation didn't have to be highly structured. It's not like I'm answering a request for proposal from the government. This is basically, how can I maximize the value that I'm giving to you in a way that I can use later on? So the challenge was, will I have time to prepare a high quality deliverable that adds value not only now, but in the future? Or will it just revert back to what I've been doing for the last 30 years of my life, of just telling crazy stories and having people laughing and learning? So the worst thing that could happen is that you still have a good time, you still learn a lot, but I wouldn't have this basis for getting more and more people. Maybe we use this structure for a book or an article, right? So at this stage, when you realize that the worst thing that can happen is we're going to have a good time and you get a lot of value, why the anxiety? Why should I worry that much? And when the anxiety is gone, you can have ataraxia, which is, you can be calm and collected, not like the Brits, cool as a cucumber, which tends to mean you don't care, and I deeply care. But you don't let anxiety be your enemy. You use it as energy to go further in what you're trying to do and to remain curious. Like, lectures do not necessarily need to be planned down to the final sentence. I've given a TEDx talk once, 3 years ago already, and it was very challenging. Now, that's because it has to be very structured. You're standing on a red dot, you're talking about a single idea, you have 500 people in the room in my case, and I was doing that in French, which is not my mother tongue, and I'm not as fluent in French as I am in English, right? So there was a lot of pressure. But what I learned while doing the research to prepare for this TED Talk is that you can have three variants that have been studied and are well understood. The first one is memorize everything, right? So one of my ideas, especially regarding wisdom acceleration for youth, like making teenagers wiser faster, which is my labor of love, my passion in life, and I spend a lot of time doing that. One of the ideas is, I will give a TED Talk in English, but I'll give the same TED Talk in 6 or 7 languages in total. Like me on stage, giving that talk in English, French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, German, because I want to make sure that the message gets across to people, and speaking their language is clearly the best way of connecting emotionally. And it's also a nice PR trick saying, who's this crazy dude who's giving the same talk in 6 different languages, right? And that helps me get further into promoting my message. So it's not like I'm seeking the attention. I do have the ability to speak 6 languages at the level that would allow me to give a TED talk. Nice parlor trick, right? My friends go like, oh, you speak so many languages. Like, yeah, sure. But what is the value being created by that? The value is my ability to deliver such a talk in multiple languages is going to attract more attention to what I'm doing, which is in this case a nonprofit effort. Now, if you're doing something like this, it makes sense for you to give your presentation in a completely memorized way. Like you get every single word, you read through it several times, you do that in front of friends, you record it and watch yourself. Then you have the let's wing it. Like if you really know your stuff, you can go on a stage in front of 500 people and do your TED talk as I'm doing right now, just having this conversation, because you've done it so many times, you know your topic so well. And if that's where you are, those talks are amazing, right? It really feels like you're having a conversation one-to-one with that person, even though it's 500 to 1. The worst thing that you can do, from what I read and from what I perceived, is getting half the way, right? So if you give presentations in the future, and I'm sure you will because you're doing an MBA class, you have to figure out, do I really want to be an expert in this topic? Am I so passionate about what I'm talking about that I want to be that kind of person who can give a presentation without any notes? Like whatever I'm saying is interesting, it comes out nicely and structured because it's so meaningful to you. Or you want to be on a safe side. And this is down to personality, but be very careful of half-baked presentations where you're a little bit prepared, but not quite, because they sound fake and the tone is wrong, the tempo, and people go like, yeah, no, the information is okay, but there's something wrong with that. So I suggest that you do a few searches on the internet in terms of how to give a TED talk. This is extremely relevant. Like I did it more than 3 years ago. I was forced into it. It was difficult because it was like where I had never given a presentation in French before, but I highly recommend that you consider giving it a TEDx, which should be easy because there's so many of them in India. And even if you don't, try to prepare for presentations as if you're giving a TED talk. It's very famous around the world, and hundreds of millions of views for a reason, because it's a very, very good format. So we're diverting a little bit away from the topic. This is just to wrap back into the 3 words. So it's eudaimonia, phronesis, ataraxia. If you haven't heard any of them, congratulations, you belong to the humanity. Like very few people on the planet have heard of those 3 words because they're very dusty, they're very old. And that's exactly why I'm bringing them here to you, so that we can remove the dust and try to understand how they can be relevant in life. So first one is eudaimonia. Like eudaimonia has been around for a very long time, and it means having a good life. And what do you mean by good life? Like good life, it depends on who you are and your family and your friends and your context, right? Having a good life in Africa is not the same as having a good life in Australia. If you have a big farm and you have a different set of problems that you need to solve. And people have a big challenge translating this, because many of the concepts that you would find normal today, like happiness, they meant something else 2,000 years ago or even longer. But the one thing that all the philosophers, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and Piro, the one who spent 1.5 years in India, they all agree that this is what we're looking for, right? This is the meaning of life. And when people ask me the meaning of life, my answer is super simple: is to make more life. Like every single cell in your body is trying to make sure that your species survives. And it's not only us, it's every single animal, viruses, COVID, right? They're just doing what they're programmed to do. And they're pretty good at it, which is why we have such a mess these days. But the meaning of life from an evolutionary perspective is just making more life. Like, great answer. It doesn't help me, right? As in, making more life. Okay, I can have lots of children, but I want to make sure that I don't have too many. Otherwise, I can't give the best possible education to all of them. Like, what's the point of having 30 kids if you live in misery? Like, no, it should be making more meaningful lives. And that's why people used to have lots of kids and they don't anymore, because they're getting more education. They go like, oh, this education thing is really interesting. It's really good. So I want to make sure my kids have that and more. Let's double that. Let's 10x the level of education and potential that I can give to my kids, meaning that you have fear of them. But you don't even have to have kids to help your species thrive. You can be that aunt or uncle, no, not being sexist here, who decides not to marry, not to have kids. Or maybe they have issues at the medical level preventing them from having children. They don't want to adopt, but they're still extremely relevant in the process of life, meaning making more life, because they are going to be the ones who are going to be guiding and helping. And children sometimes, quite often in fact, they have clashes with mom or dad, and then you have that uncle that comes and saying, yeah, you should really consider this. Are you being fair? Have you looked at that? Let me introduce you to someone. And because there's no clash, all of a sudden you will consider it, right? You're a 15-year-old and everything that your parents will tell you do exactly the opposite. But there's someone who doesn't have any children say, look, I've been there and this is what I'll do in your place. And sometimes you take that option. So that uncle or aunt without any children is helping life make more life. But this is just one very basic element. How can I have meaningful individual lives? And I would say that this is the main topic of this presentation. In fact, this is a presentation about eudaimonia, but if I told you guys that, you probably wouldn't show up. It's like, no, what is this crazy dude trying to tell me something about ancient Greece and how is that relevant to me? In fact, it's very relevant. This is the reason why you exist. Right? It doesn't get more relevant than having a flourishing life. And flourishing is a good word because there are many different types of flowers, right? The flowers that grow close to the sea are not the same flowers that grow up in the Himalayas. So flourishing basically means blossoming into your potential or one of your multiple potentials. Like if you miss out on going to the army and becoming a jet fighter pilot, those passions can be directed into joining an aircraft manufacturer and building better planes, right? So you want to make sure that you understand that if you always, I wanted to work for McKinsey, right? I got into Accenture, which is clearly not a small company, and I got into their Center for Strategic Technology. As in, literally, we were the SWAT team of Accenture worldwide, being sent to clients that wanted to implement new technologies that had been proven in a lab, but are still 1 to 5 years out from commercialization, and we're the ones supposed to make it work. Right? So my first job with Accenture was doing the full conversion of analog TV into digital TV in the UK with cable and wireless back in 98, 99. Literally, we had a bunch of guys in the white lab coats saying, yeah, it works here. And we had to make sure it would work with 5 million customers. So even though I was doing something that was deeply strategic, was clearly technological, I still had this feeling, oh yeah, I really wish I could have joined McKinsey. Like, because McKinsey for me was the objective. It was the mountain I was trying to climb. And now in hindsight, I look back at that and say, I'm really, really thankful that I didn't join them, because I wouldn't have been a good McKinsey consultant. I'm too adventurous. I'm not analytical enough. I'm good at arriving in pioneering situations where there are lots of elements that need to be put into place, and you need to help your client make the jump, right? It's pointless for a company like Cable and Wireless to hire specialized staff to take them from an analog platform to a digital platform, because they only do it once. After a year, it's done, right? The staff that they need is operational. So they need to have people, and this is kind of career advice of sorts if you want to get into consulting. Like, consultants get slagged off a lot, as in, oh, you're the guys going to the client, the client asks for the time, you ask for their watch, you tell them the time, and you keep the watch. Like, haha. No, some consultants probably are, but are they providing value? No, they're not. Like, if they're telling the time and keeping the watch, clearly that is not a transaction that is ever going to be repeated. But consulting is much more than going there, giving them packaged advice, and then hoping that they won't notice. Like, when you're converting the analog platform in a whole country into digital, you're adding enormous value they would not be capable of doing themselves. So you need to make sure that you are in the kind of position where those skills are in line with what you're trying to achieve. So even though I had this potential future as like, oh, I want to be the McKinsey consultant, like I still admire their intellect, but I really don't like the work that they do, because they tend to be the ones that get in, write the report, and then it disappears. Like, how fulfilling is that? As in, literally after 3 months working 18 hours a day, you wrote a 300-page report that few people read, and you get into political games where they say, oh, but the consultants told us this. Like, maybe for some people that's exactly what they're looking for. Lots of people in think tanks and all sorts of analytical companies, they're really good at that, and they are creating a lot of value. But it was not for me. So the definition of that's my goal, this is what I want to do, evolved over time. And I found my flourishing in a very different place from what I had expected. And this is a good example of eudaimonia, right? So eudaimonia, if you break down the word, the etymology, eu, like EU, means good. And daimonia comes from demon. It comes from spirit. So eudaimonia is being guided by a guardian angel. So there's a cacodemon, which is a bad demon, but you never hear about that one. But the eudaimonia means your spirit is guiding you. You're being counseled by some higher level spirits. And this is kind of Greece 2000 years ago, so not a lot of science in there. But that's where it comes from. It basically means that you're being helped by someone who deeply cares about you, and no one cares about you more than yourself. So make sure that you understand where you're going, roughly the direction, but also the fact that this will change, right? So there are many ways to get to the summit of a mountain, right? So if you define the mountain as your objective, don't be too picky in terms of, oh, I have to go through this trail. Maybe there's a rock fall and you have to go around. It's like, fine. It doesn't matter. You're trying to get to the summit of a mountain, right? So I don't want to linger too much here, but it's important that we have this conversation. So eudaimonia basically being welfare and feeling satisfied, arriving at the end of your life saying, wow, that was a life really well lived. Whatever that means to you, the most important thing is think about it. Try to understand from your perspective, what is it? Like, what are the multiple possibilities that will make you look back? And I think all of you would live to be 100 years old. No, surely hope so, considering medical advances and statistics. So let's say you're 100, you look back and you go like, wow, this is really amazing. And I just turned 50 and I looked back and I'm like, I already lived enough for multiple lives. So I'm now doing extra time. Right? So I'm okay with what I've done so far. But you need to make sure that you put yourself in that situation, and you don't think only about money, about power, about influence. Think about eudaimonia. Think about a flourishing life. Have you truly blossomed in one of your multiple potentials or not? And that will make it a lot easier, right? It gives you a map to get to a summit. And there's so many mountains out there. We don't all have to climb Mont Blanc or the Everest. No, there are other mountains to climb. But make sure that you understand which mountain is trying to climb, what you need to get there, and build yourself a map, but stay flexible, right? So this is enough for the first concept. The second concept would be phronesis. And phronesis is really interesting, right? Because when you're talking about wisdom, and I'm speaking to the Athena School of Management, so it could not be more relevant in terms of the goddess of wisdom herself, blessing the Zoom call. And usually when we talk about wisdom, it tends to be the word that the Greeks define as Sophia. And Sophia is the spiritual wisdom, is basically being blessed by the gods with the ability to make right decisions at the right time for the right reasons and so on. But it's something that you could say is highly dependent on your level of spirituality, where you're born, what kind of gods you can listen to in your neighborhood. And I tend not to go there. I mean, respect spirituality tremendously. I'm very curious and open. So if anyone tells me something that I didn't know and this adds value to my life, I'm very willing to listen and to debate. But the wisdom that people don't talk about is phronesis, which is practical wisdom. This is life hacks. Like, as in being in a situation where you've been there before, or you read about something, it's like, ooh, this is not looking good. As in, it's your gut feeling that, man, this is not something you want to be involved with. And then maybe you then jump into the pool, you dip your toes to check if the water is still cold, right? So phronesis is extremely important and is very, very hard to teach. You can't just get a SIM card and upgrade your phronesis. You have to go through those experiences, which is the main reason why I started Wisdom Accelerator for Youth, so that teenagers from the age of 12, 13, they're exposed to the lessons that older people have learned. Like Aditya had a great session. It's talking about all the things that he's done. And all of a sudden you have those teenagers going like, okay, this sounds really cool. I mean, he is not what I expected the director of a school to be. He's a really cool guy. So maybe I want to get into education, right? But uh, it's very, very hard, especially for teenagers and the youth in general, who are geographically bound, even though we have this perception of being global. And yeah, of course, I can have a Zoom Skype call with someone on the other side of the planet. Yeah, but you don't, right? No, you're highly influenced by your surroundings. So we tend to have those echo chambers where people and just sharing similar opinions because you go to the same club or you kind of join, an association, or are you in the same neighborhood. So it's really important. And again, this is an element of the Wisdom Accelerator, that the opinions that we're sharing come from all over the world and all walks of life, all industries and all segments. And no, it's very successful so far. And I believe that this is something that we'll be doing for a very long time. But when it comes to your own decision in terms of what kind of practical wisdom do I need? Well, it depends on where you're going, right? So if you want to be a mountaineer, you probably want to know how to use rock climbing equipment. If you don't care at all, your practical wisdom maybe relates to people. Like if you climb a mountain alone, you don't really need very much social skills. It's still relevant though, because people coming down from the mountain, they have lots of highly relevant information. So I was having those conversations going up Mont Blanc, asking, do you have any cracks on the glacier? Do I have to be careful? Anything to be avoided? And they'll give me this very precious, very relevant and timely information saying, this morning, no, it looks like it's safe. So you still need to have the social skills, but what you really need is the natural skills to perceive your environment and to protect yourself from danger. But if you want to be the host of a club, right, the social skills are going to be paramount. So keep in mind that phronesis as such exists as a concept, that it is very important, and that is like compound interest. Like the skills that you're learning now, either through your own experience or by learning from others, will be helpful to you for the rest of your life. Not always. Some of them may be completely irrelevant. Like I bought this hat 30 years ago, and it's the first time that I'm actually using it. Hey, no, it was an investment I made 30 years ago, and now I have a reason to get value from it. But make sure you're fully aware of the word, so that you can make very conscious decisions when it comes to acquiring knowledge. Try to understand, why is this relevant, but keep an open mind, right? Maybe like my hat is not relevant 30 years ago. It was just a fun thing because I had just watched Indiana Jones and I wanted to have the hat. And today, finally, it's kind of relevant, right? Within the context of this talk. So The third word, and I have to speed up a bit, is ataraxia. And ataraxia, as we discussed before, is very closely linked to your ability to listen to yourself. Like the know thyself is, oh, I'm feeling anxious because I only have a few hours to prepare this presentation. And the fact that I could tell that I was getting into that mental state allowed me to change my mood. It was like, oh, how curious. Like, no, I don't get nervous very often because I've done so many different things that led me into going like, yeah, it's gonna be fine. Like, I can jump into the pool because even if it's very cold, I have jumped into cold pools before and I was fine, right? But yesterday I was feeling very anxious, and the fact that I could notice that, and this can come from meditation, from observation, from conversations with friends and family, but make sure that when you're facing a challenge, you understand that some challenges are imposed, right? So in a house and a fight and there, this is clearly not something that you wanted, right? But also try to understand that the focus should not be on panicking, and it should definitely not be on giving up. It should be on finding solutions using all the life hacks that I learned in the past. So it's much better to impose challenges on yourself that were that's not possible, but try to keep in mind that you are gaining value. Of course, if the house is on fire and you can't get out, you don't worry about anything anymore, right? It's no longer your issue. But that's an extreme example. If you have other situations, like there's a fire and you manage to get out. Now, one of the times I very closely died was in a big fire. Like I was in the skyscraper in Rio and nobody knew what to do. There was a lot of smoke, and I decided to enter the room to try to find and put out the fire. And I almost passed out. And I would have passed out in darkness with lots of water on the floor because of the sprinkler system was just trying to put out a fire, but it couldn't. And I managed to put out the fire before the fireman arrived. And I managed to get out before passing out. Like that was really, really stupid. I was 21, I think, and is not something I recommend to anyone. But the point is, if I hadn't done that, probably the top part of the building would have gone up in flames. So I did it because there was so much at stake, and it was so important, and no one else was willing to do that. And I managed to survive. And literally, this is a survival situation because it was very close to passing out. And I learned so many lessons that now allow me to get much closer to danger because I understand where the border lies. So you really want to make sure that you gain so much practical experience, the phronesis part, because you have such a clear idea of what the meaning of your life is, so the eudaimonia part, that ataraxia is a normal outcome. It's like, no, I have to remain calm because this is just a tiny part of my life. It's just a step, not a very pleasant step if it's a challenge, especially if it's a challenge that is imposing you, but it is a step towards my path to eudaimonia and a flourishing life. And then it's so much easier for you to stay calm and collected when everybody else is panicking. So I'd like to have a little break. Just want to make sure that we okay with time. And the idea here, because we discussed those 3 words, is try to figure out a situation where you had a challenge that was really quite remarkable. It was like a 5x, 10x times more than anything you had faced before. And try to realize, is that something that today makes you stronger? Is that something that allowed you to growth, whatever way it is, right? Maybe it was very painful, maybe it was really difficult, but are you okay now? As in, are you better off now because you went through that situation? It could be either something you chose to do, like me climbing Mont Blanc after a very long fast, or is that something that was imposed? But try to keep in mind the consequences of that specific challenge, and also try to break down all the practical skills you've learned. Like, I'm more patient, I react more quickly, I got access to new sources of information, like me, preparing to give this TED talk. Now I can help other people. I read 2-3 books. I know all the websites where I can very swiftly say, oh, you want to give a TEDx? Here's a package. This is my package. If it's for you or not, it's a good place to start. You decide if you want to use it or not, but I can help others, and I can surely give better TED Talks in the future after having gone through that myself. So the practical skills. And how did you face the challenge? Is that something that really caused you to panic, and you were frozen and you needed help to get out of that, and maybe you failed, right? And what are the lessons that you got from that failure? So think about it. And if you want to, feel free to share that in the chat. Maybe some of those things would be embarrassing. Don't have to share, of course. But if you have anything that you think could be useful to others, that's a good place to release this information. Because as you guys are in the same class, maybe a few weeks or a few months from now, your colleagues from the class would ask, hey, can you tell me more about when you had to do this exam, or when you had to give that TED talk, or whatever it is that you did and you faced the challenge, because they probably don't know, right? So think about it, and share in the chat if you wish, and we'll get back to that later. So we don't really have a time for a full explanation of how I ended up fasting for 100 days. And just to give you an idea, I now I'm back to my normal weight. In fact, a little bit above what I want, because I'm stuck at home and taking it too easy. But I lost almost 40% of my body mass. And that's the equivalent of someone chopping off your body from the waist down. Like, you lose your feet, legs, and waist, and the only thing that is left is your abdomen, thorax, and head, and arms. So that's around 60% of your body. So this is really extreme, right? Usually you hear about people who lost 100 kilos. That's because they started at 400. No, I started at 100 and ended up at 61.5. So it's quite uncommon that people go from almost obese, like 100 for me would be like, yeah, overweight, but you're getting into obesity, like a body mass index of 30 is 100 kilos in my case. And I went all the way down as quickly as possible, but not too quickly, to almost underweight. And that literally took eating nothing for 1/3 of the year. I don't think that you guys have severe weight concerns in India, at least not yet. It's definitely a problem in most European countries. In the US, no need to mention, because a bit of a current joke. In my own country, it is a big problem. And in many other countries, it is as well. So losing weight is extremely difficult, but that's not the only reason. It's one of the main reasons. I wanted to develop a tool to put in my toolbox that would allow me to know that if I want to lose a lot of weight, I know how to do it, and I can do it anytime, because this is very empowering. And now I know that right now I could stop eating for more than 2 months and only drink water, take some salt and potassium and maybe a vitamin pill. And 2 months from now, I'll be really skinny, but I'll be fine. Because I've done a 50 days fast, doing a 60 days fast, knowing the weight that I have right now and my reactions to having gone through that experiment, it leads me to believe that, well, yeah, no, this is just adding 20% to my previous experiment. So I didn't go straight to 50 days without eating anything, like longer than Buddha on his way to Nirvana. I didn't find Nirvana, by the way, but I did find a few other interesting things during that path. So the other reason why you do something like fasting is mind control. Like, I literally bought my favorite chocolate, lots of bars, and I had a bar of my favorite chocolate in every single place in my house. So I could not look anywhere without seeing my favorite chocolate while I was eating nothing for 50 days. And the whole point is, I made my mind. This is binary. I decided that I'm going to finish this experiment, and unless there are health reasons for me to stop it, I'm not going to swap the potential to learn something here and to share with others because of a bar of chocolate. So I was trying to make it really difficult on purpose, and it worked fine. I mean, I still have the same, my favorite chocolate is Toblerone. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. It's the shape of a mountain in Switzerland, and it's delicious. And I still have those chocolates in the house because I decided that I will only eat this chocolate if I climb a mountain. So every time I go to a new summit, I have a bar and I eat it at the summit just to congratulate myself for having made it. Otherwise, it's just there all the time. If I feel like eating chocolate, too bad. That chocolate is not available, right? So the mind control element is really important. And there are a couple of other elements worth mentioning. Like you're all very young right now, which is great. So as I said, you're probably going to get to 100, but you don't want to get to 100 feeling ill, right? So there's something called lifespan, how many years you have as a functioning body. And then you have something called health span. Like you really don't want to live until you're 50, get sick with diabetes or heart disease or whatnot, and then have the next 50 years of life in misery, bedridden with pain and taking medications, and you can't do this and you can't do that, right? So lifespan is great, but health span is so much more important. And having the mind control to stay away from certain negative temptations, and we all have them, and they're always different. Now, food is a common one, but there's so many other temptations that we all know that we shouldn't be falling victims of. So the mind control that comes from deciding not to eat anything for 50 days and being okay with that now allows me to shame myself. So if I am at an event and I'm having too many sweets, I can detach from my own body and say, shame on you, right? Or you know that this is not good for you, and you know that you're capable of not eating for 50 days. So why do you have to eat 5 cookies? And all of a sudden, you're talking to this kind of virtual self that is your demon, like your good spirit. It's like, yeah, you're right. I mean, I'll have 1 cookie, and that's a good compromise. Like I deserve a cookie, right? It's like me climbing a mountain. I deserve my favorite chocolate. But the mind control allows you to make better decisions. And it's not only food. It could be, do I want to quit my job? Do I want to go traveling? Do I want to start an association? It could be whatever. And it allows you to stick to your knitting, right? You have an objective, you know the direction you want to give to your life, and that's the eudaimonia part. And you have the mind control to say, I want to stick to this because this is the meaning of my individual life, not the meaning of life for the species, which is to make more life, but this is my purpose, the way and the reason why I'm driven into a specific direction, even though I'm keeping options flexible in terms of you don't want to go there, you want to go over there, but no, that's something that helps you in the future. So that's a really important one. There are some technical elements. I'm not going to get into those. When you're fasting, what happens is you're switching your body from a sugar burning engine. And I usually compare that to a petrol engine. Right? It burns a fuel that is full of additives and pollutants, so it's not very efficient. And you have lots of byproducts like toxins and stuff that your body needs to get rid of. And after a day and a half to 2 days, when you don't have any sugar coming in and you use all the sugar that you have in your body, the body turns the fat burning engine. And fat burning is like a hydrogen engine that is burning a very simple molecule. In fact, the tree, the ketone bodies, is the most important thing is to realize that it burns very clean, right? So this is why it's stored in a body, because it's a reserve that allows you to do well even when there are no berries, no roots, no eggs for you to forage. And going back to our past as hunter-gatherers here, but hey, this is how your body still works. And the other thing that happens, which you may want to study, and I have a few references at the end of the presentation, is something called apoptosis. And apoptosis is there are cells in your body. Well, all cells in your body are programmed to die at some point in time, right? And then you have new cells being created, and there's a new science of telomeres, which is kind of the end of your DNA. Every time a cell in your body is being duplicated and the previous cell dies, and then you have the new one replacing it, the telomeres, they sort of get shorter. And the more divisions you have, the closer you are to the limit when the cell can't divide anymore. And that's when you get old, right? So you really want to make sure that you get rid of weak cells. This apoptosis is basically making sure the cells that are going to die anyway, they cleans from your body as quickly as possible. And fasting triggers that. It triggers something called autophagy, which is like eating yourself. It sounds a bit scary, when in fact what it is that you're recycling the cells that are gonna be replaced anyway, getting rid of all the junk and gunk that you have in your body, because there's no sugar coming in. So the body goes like, okay, what else do I have around which is not fundamental for my physiology to keep on functioning that I can use as fuel? So you get rid of all the trash. And I am not a doctor. I have just, I'm a guy who read stuff from the internet, right? But I'm also a guy who fasted for 100 days. So it's a sample of what I believe is meaningful. And I can point you towards doctors who have studied this, and they have very similar protocols to what I have right now. So I don't do crazy long fast anymore. I'm not planning to. But what I do is that every 3 months, I eat nothing for 1 week. And that clears all the trash. I'll lose whatever, 3 kilos, 4 kilos. And I know that I can get it back very quickly, too quickly, actually. We should be a bit slower on getting the weight back. So think about it. I'm not recommending fasting here. That's not the point of this conversation. The point is, through fasting and through this extreme fast, like longer than Buddha, I was like, okay, I learned a few things that could be used to other people. So going to the points that I have on the slide. So the beginning of the whole thing was, okay, I am eating too much, traveling all the time, breakfast buffets and conferences and events, and I was close to becoming obese, right? And as you're traveling, you're not weighting yourself as much. And when you go back home and you weight yourself, it's like, oops, I have to do something about it. And then you travel again, right? So it's extremely challenging because of those environment restrictions. So I was at home for a week. I was like, I'll give it a go. Let's see how it works. And it's absolutely awful, right? If, like, I'll say 99.99% of all the people on the planet, you would never spend 24 hours without food, it really sucks. Because your body goes like, dude, what's going on? I mean, I have sugar all the time. Why are you doing this to me? And after I knew a bit dizzy and go like, if I didn't die after 50 days without food, it's very unlikely that anyone is going to have serious issues after 1 day without food. But that's not the way society perceives this, especially with the big food manufacturers saying, have a cookie, have a candy bar. That's how they make money, right? So you have to ask yourself, are they doing that for my benefit? Probably not. And then you can be curious and you can go like, okay, you only really start having health risks. And I'll make the point again, some people have underlying conditions, so do not do anything like this without a doctor. But people will start having serious health issues after 3 weeks of fasting. So the first one I did was 1 week, pretty awful, but after 7 days I was feeling great. But I didn't really know the consequences, right? So I needed to study more. So I stopped at 7 days. And then the second time that I did was 21 days. And I can actually share that I think I sent it to him. There's a Facebook post where I'm explaining in a very low level of detail this 21 days fast.
Yeah,
And
you shared
there's
it with me.
lots of references as well. So you guys can check it out. It's public, right? And because I had done 21 days, I noticed that there's a pattern here. Like there's um, this entropy curve, as in entropy, being the scale of disorder in the universe, right? So everything is decaying, the stars, and I don't want to get into discussing entropy here because you could spend 2 hours on the topic, but have a look at entropy, and it's really, really interesting. And I could tell that it was a line, like every kilo of fat contains 7,700 calories. So if you eat nothing for 3 days and you're burning energy at 2.2 or 3 thousand calories, you lose a kilo of fat. It's that simple. So because I had done 21 days, I was like, let me see if, and that's when the experiment came to my mind. It's like, wow, if I fast a total of around 100 days following this very clear line, I would get to the point in which I'm almost underweight. And I would have lost at that point in time 250,000 calories. If I'm feeling okay and my doctor, who's a good friend from high school, thinks it's fine, I was measuring everything. I had this super smart watch. I had a little plug on my arm telling me all the time what were my sugar levels, right? I was doing this with as much support as you can get without a hospital. If I'm feeling fine, I'll just keep on going until 50 days. I was turning 50 like a month and a half later. It's like, no, how memorable is that? I mean, commemorating turning half a century by fasting for 50 days. And I'm learning so much, and then I can share that with others. So I was always very careful, making sure that I was staying within my comfort boundary. And that's exactly what happened. The uncomfort boundary from the very first fast, which I stopped after a week, was mainly due to the fact that, yes, you're losing a lot of fat, but you're also losing some muscle. Like you're cleaning out the trash from your body, but depending on how long you fast for, you will lose muscle. And the one muscle you don't want to lose is your heart. So I was very concerned that if I fast for too long, my heart's going to be weak. And when people die of fasting, usually they had a heart failure. And that led me into the other element that eventually got to the Mont Blanc story, which is I need to make sure my heart keeps on beating a lot, because then my body go, oh, no, I can't take muscle from that guy. I'll take muscle from the leg or whatever, right? So I started doing 10,000 steps a day, which is recommended to lots of people. And I really highly recommend that you consider having your calls with your friends while you're walking, right? I don't know where you live. Maybe you're in a city and it's difficult, but walking is the easiest way to make sure that you have a healthier life and you're increasing your health span and, of course, your lifespan. The listening to the body is also very important. Like trying to figure out what's going on. So on day 8 or 9 of this 21 days fast, my heart started beating like crazy, and it was really regular. And I sent a WhatsApp message to my doctor friend, said, this is super weird. I was like, oh, you run out of potassium, because for the first 7 days, you have enough potassium stored in your bones. You just run out of supply. So you're having a electrolyte balance issue. Just take a potassium pill and take a teaspoon of salt every morning, which is why I always do that. And for the 50 days, I had salt and potassium, and also a multivitamin just to be on the safe side. But I didn't even think that was that important. But then again, I did take it. I wanted to be on the safe side, and it's still 0 calories, which was the objective. So listening to your body and going like, oh, this is super weird. Let me double check. Let me give it some time. Maybe you'll go away. But there was a very direct action that I could have taken and I did take, which solved the problem. Like I was taking the potassium, the body's, oh, thanks, mate. No, that's all I need. I don't need food. I need electrolytes. And that's what solved the issue. Now, what happened on the 21 days fast, because I was exercising so much to prevent my heart from losing muscle, it got to the point is like, okay, I'm eating nothing now for almost 2 weeks. and I'm doing fine. Like it was the longest I had done so far. Can I do a marathon? As in, how far can I go without food? And turned out to be a beautiful sunny Sunday. There is a lake close to my house that is almost exactly the length of a marathon. It's actually 45 kilometers. So I just went there, left my car in a place that was close to the train station. I started going around the lake on the side that doesn't have any train stations, so that on the way back, if I got really exhausted, I just walk to the closest station and then go back to my car. So trying to do the marathon was like, why not? I mean, what is the worst thing that could happen? I have to take a taxi if there are no train stations and my knees are completely destroyed. That didn't happen. My knees were destroyed. They still hate me, but I managed to go all the way back. And I actually, I was speed walking, so I was not running a marathon. The marathon is a distance, but I walked 48 kilometers that day. And it was really funny because I got home at 11 something in the evening, and I was missing a few thousand steps to get to, I think, 70,000 steps. So it's close to midnight. I'm walking around in circles like an idiot in my garden, just trying to make sure that I get to 70,000 steps before midnight, because then the clock would just reset. So the crazy idea of why not? No, maybe I'll do half a marathon. Maybe it will start hurting after 5 kilometers, but I'll try. Because if you're doing 10,000 steps every day, it's around 7 kilometers, right? So it's significant, but I was trying to multiply that by 7, and I got to almost 49 kilometers in the end. So it was ridiculous. And yet I did it after 2 weeks without any food. So that's going to be in the post, and you can get more details there. I mean, I'm aware of the time. We only have 15 more minutes. I'd like you guys to ask any questions. So the point being, this why not mentality is very well defined by something called the SEAL 40% rule. And this rule is pretty much when you think you're totally exhausted, you can't go any further, you're at about 40% of what you can actually do. So check it out. You'll learn a lot. And the other thing that's really important is that instead of giving up, just learn to rest. Like I did stop every 10 kilometers or so for 10 to 15 minutes. And that gave me the boost. Because what happens when you're burning fat as fuel is that you don't have explosive power, right? So what you do have is a constant flux of fat being burned into what's called a beta hydroxybutyrate, acetacetate, and acetone. So these are the 3 ketones that are fueling your body. And it's fairly complicated. Some of them turn into glucose because the brain needs some glucose, so the body will do the conversion. But you can't do anything too fast, right? So you can push your heartbeats 120, 130, but you need to make sure that you allow the hydrogen tank to give you the fuel. So running, for instance, would be very challenging. I mean, I'm sure that super fit people can do that. I'm 50, right? So I'm not claiming to be a sportsman, but that was enough to cover more than a marathon without any food for 2 weeks. So stop, give yourself some time. And if you're really in a situation where you can't go any further, that's when you kind of learn when to grit and when to quit. Like I did reach my wall during the 50 days fast when I was trying to do an ultra marathon on day 48. So I had done more than a marathon day 14. It's like, okay, let me try something extra super duper crazy. And I failed. Like I could only do 25 kilometers instead of an ultra marathon, which in principle is from 50 kilometers. I found my limits, but by finding that limit, and that's really because I had lost so much muscle. I lost around 25 to 30% of the muscle in my body. I got it all back in a month, right? Because I could climb alone after some training. But the really interesting thing is that I ended up thinking, okay, I tried to do the ultra marathon after almost more than 7 weeks, almost 7 weeks without any food, and I failed. I did only half. If I start eating again, how quickly can I do something crazy to figure out the limits of human resilience and endurance. So I ate for a week, and then I went for a hike, which is the caloric equivalent of an ultramarathon. It's a hike that people usually do in 3 days, and I did it in 1 day. So it took a week for me to achieve my goal. And then once I achieved that goal, and I wouldn't have even tried, like if I had managed to do the ultramarathon, I would go like, oh, I'm done, I'm good here. Like I proved to myself that I can do crazy, and then I can do 10 times crazier. But I failed. And by failing it, I was like, okay, so let me relax, try to figure out what else can I do and what I need to get there. And all that I needed was a week with food. And I managed also to recover my knees, right? And I managed to do that. I was like, okay, what else can I do? What is really the craziest people that a person who's coming out of starvation could do? Maybe climbing Mont Blanc. So I've had a picture of Mont Blanc on my wall when I was obese or close to obese at 100 kilos. And that picture had been on my kitchen for 3 years. It wasn't very effective of preventing me from eating cookies, but no, it surely was effective of telling me that is one of your objectives in life. You don't have to do it now, but make sure you consider doing it when I have a chance to do it. And that's exactly what that was. Like, this is where I could really harness maximum value when I'm coming out of starvation, proving how quickly you can recover to do something that is very, very hard to do, even if you're very fit. Because I had 10 years of rock climbing experience, I started analyzing and asking friends, is the weather going to be fine? It's like, wonderful, the 3 days when the weather is going to be perfect. So let me give it a go. And let me give it a go alone. And let me start from the most difficult place, because you don't have to start at the bottom of the valley of Chamonix, right? You can start from the top of the train station, and that is 1,300 meters higher. I was like, no, if I'm going crazy, I'm going full crazy. Then I'm going to make the hardest possible challenge that I can. And keep that in mind. That was me imposing that challenge on myself. No one is telling me I had to climb Mont Blanc, otherwise I'll get shot, right? So optionality, and the fact that I could give up at any point in time is really important. But the thing is, when you do lots of crazy things, driven by your own wishes and desires, and you challenge yourself, whenever there's something that happens that is outside of your control, you go like, that is easy. I think for me, doing a 7 days fast now is almost like an afterthought. Like, I've done 50. Okay. It's late February. It's already 3 months since my last fast. I have to stop eating for a week. Sure. But 3 years ago, I was like, can you actually do it? I mean, do you have to be a yogi in an ashram to fast? Like, no, you can actually go for marathons after 2 weeks fasting or longer. So my recommendation is that try to figure out what are the craziest thing you can do within your boundaries of comfort that would prepare you to be more resilient, that would put you in a situation where when life throws a challenge at you, you go like, whatever, ataraxia, like, I'm fine. I know I'm going to be okay. But you only get to have that kind of cool reaction when you've challenged yourself under controlled circumstances. And most people don't. They just sort of wait until life throws the challenges, and yeah, they grow, but they don't grow to the potential. They grow to the size of the challenges life has given them before. So you're limiting yourself. That's also a fair choice, right? If you want to have that kind of life, by all means, that's not the choice that I made, clearly. So one of the things that now is a direct consequence, so to say, an evolution from the whole thing of fasting longer than Buddha, then climbing the highest mountain in the Alps less than a month later, is that I just had this idea, like, I want to be the oldest person in the world to do A, B, C. Like, I want to be the oldest person to climb the Everest. And the record now is a Japanese guy. He was 80 years old. I would like to climb Everest when I'm 90. It's going to be 40 years from now, so probably going to have the record will keep on going up, right? And maybe we have some cybernetic help of people using robot legs to get up there. But it is an objective for me. If I become the oldest person in the world to climb the Everest, great. If I don't, who cares? It's my game, my rules, right? I'm the one defining success. I don't need the world to tell me I'm successful. I'm happy and I'm achieving eudaimonia, a life worth living, because I'm giving myself challenges that I find deeply fulfilling. Anyway, so that's it for the story. I could keep on talking here for another hour or so, but I think these are the most important elements. And 3 new words. Like you thought you were going to get away with only 3 Greek words. Now here you have 3 new words. These are a little bit simpler, but also very relevant. And they're new in the sense that they didn't exist back in the ancient Greek times. And these words are quite scientific. They're, in some cases, only half serious, but they're all relevant. So the first one is hormesis, second one is pronoia, and homeostasis is the final one. Now, hormesis is good stress. So as I don't have much time, let's just move there. So the good stress is basically stuff that you do, like when you go to the gym and you're exercising, or you do breathing exercises. For how long can you hold your breath? No, please don't do that if you don't know what you're doing. And it's a classic. It doesn't kill you, makes you stronger. It's not the poison, it's the dose. It's not necessarily right. There are lots of things that you can do, like chopping off your fingers, for instance, doesn't have a dose, right? Please don't chop off your fingers. There's no good thing coming out of that. But many things like exercise, they do. And hormesis is the right amount of stress that is good for you, because fasting is a very good example. If you're fasting, you're putting your body under stress. So the body reacts and it cleans the trash, like all the old cells, and it produces stem cells that will give you a fresh set that will replace the old ones. But if you fast for 2 months, you're going to die. Not a good idea. Please don't do it. Now, could actually be shorter than 2 months. In my case, it's 2 months because I have a little bit to spare these days. And you probably want to figure out what is a dose that makes it the strongest. Right? And I like mentioning that even water, if you have too much of it, you're going to drown. Right? So water is so great, is it? I mean, not when you're under it and you can't breathe. And the world is shifting towards this VUCA reality. So please do research VUCA because it's super relevant, especially if you're doing an MBA. It's volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. No, the world is moving fast and it's accelerating the acceleration, right? So you need to make sure that you can cope with whatever life throws at you. And having the skill sets to understand which challenges will make you better prepared for these 4 elements is very likely to lead you into a situation where you're having a life worth living. The next one is pronoia. And this is really funny because you have paranoia, like I think that everybody's trying to do things behind your back to put you down. Pronoia is the opposite, and is a neologism. It's from 1981. And it basically means that you waltz through life thinking that everybody's trying to help you. Of course, you don't want to be naive, right? Someone is trying to steal your wallet. That person is not trying to help you. Maybe you get some value out of learning how to use Velcro, close a button, put your wallet in the front pocket, whatever. But no, you probably don't want to go through that. You can go through those exercises before you get a wallet stolen. Now, pronoia is pretty much the mindset that if you think you're going to succeed, if you think you're going to fail, you're kind of right? Because if you think you're going to fail, you just don't put enough effort in it. If you think you're going to succeed, maybe you fail, but not if you restructure the definition of success as in how much have I learned? Like how much new information do I have now, which is going to be helping me for the rest of my life? Is the thing of the child putting a hand on the hot stove. Is that good? No. Is that pleasant? No. Does that help you preventing no greater damage in the future? Hell yeah. Like, so how many of your fingers you want to get burned? No, metaphorically speaking, please don't stick your fingers anywhere. That will be painful. But if you add to the definition of a success, trying to do a startup project and then failing, right? The startup did not become a unicorn. Did you fail? Kind of depends how much effort and time you put into it. how many lessons are you drawing from that so that the next startup is going to be so much better? So try to be realistic, but also be positive without deceiving others, right? It's what happens in many startup situations that the founders just lie and they try to get people and they don't have money to pay the salaries. In many countries, that gets you to jail. Like if you're telling people to work and you don't have money in the bank to pay them a salary, you're committing a crime. Not sure what's the situation in India, but you want to be upfront, but you want to be very positive, as in you have your map, you know where you're going, and people will start coming around you. Like they'll go like, wow, this person really has a vision that I enjoy. So when I created Wisdom Accelerator, again, I can send it to Aditya, the story behind Wisdom Accelerator. Like my daughter has a crazy life. Like, she asked me once when she was 14 years old if she could go to the World Economic Forum, and 6 months later, she was moderating a panel in Davos. It was insane. Like 6 months after that, she was moderating at the World Trade Organization when she was 15 with 100 delegates in the room. And she was doing it alone, right? A 15-year-old talking about blockchain and trade. Some people in that room were 5 times older than her. And I thought, well, her life is full of magic. How can I scale magic? Well, let me do something called a Wisdom Accelerator, right? She had lots of accelerations, opportunities because of my connections and the fact that I'm crazy. How can I make sure that as many teenagers as possible can have that experience? So I threw the idea out there, and all of a sudden I have people coming, yeah, I want to speak for 20 minutes. And we had more than 300 speakers from 60 countries. So make sure that you have this strong vision, that you really believe in it, and make sure that people realize that this is what you care about, and many of them will come to help you, whichever way, shape, or form that help could turn out to be. The last one is also quite complex. Homeostasis is balance, right? So if you have a glass of water, you put salt in it, the salt will be dissolving until you put too much salt and it goes to the bottom because the water is saturated. So you reach some sort of a homeostasis where you have maximum saturation but no salt being deposed, so you don't go further. So this is important in the sense that there's a whole range of things. I do crazy stuff because I have a lot of information. I have very good sources of people who are telling me that it is possible to do this, and that, and these are people that I trust. So you don't want to say I'm courageous when in fact you're reckless. Like you don't know what you're doing, you're putting other people in harm's way. And that could be leading a project, creating a startup when you don't have the right level of support, financial or otherwise, and other people suffer because of your decisions. So make sure that you find this golden mean, right? And humans are extremely adaptive. So if you start doing a startup doing gadgets that are blue and are sold in China, and then you say, okay, there's a big market for red gadgets in India, make sure you keep that flexibility, right? So pay attention to how you can pivot and shift. And I'm sure you have lots of classes in your MBA class, program about that. So I'm not getting into details here. But homeostasis is also very important. It's a golden mean, not too much, not too little. And this is universal. Most cultures have that. So this is a sharing time. I haven't seen the chat. So if you have shared anything, do you have any questions, right? So we're coming to an end now. So any questions, anything you'd like to know that I can help with?
Marcel, I'll just take away from Spotlight so we get the gallery view back, if that's possible.
Yeah.
Could you, if you could stop sharing for a moment, we get the gallery view back, and then they'll have their Q&A.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. If you could stop sharing, please.
So I pause the sharing. Should I stop it?
I'll stop it on your behalf. Okay, you can stop it now. Perfect. We're back now. Thank you. So I think there are a couple of questions which I heard. Those of us who have questions, please go ahead and ask Marcelo right now, because then he'll be then ending it with a video. So I think it's better if you ask the question first. I think a couple of us had questions.
Yes, I have a question. Right, Ubaid just typed something.
You go ahead, then I'll ask Obed to ask. Don't worry.
Yeah. Sir, my question was that as you achieved this, I mean, what were the, how did you overcome? I mean, there might be, as you said about there's something light in the inner of us. So how did you, evaluate? I mean, how did you come up with that? Because you had to keep that going in your mind, that you had to achieve that. And at that particular time, we feel very low because there's a lot of pressure. So how did you overcome it? I mean, from your personal point of view.
Oh, it's a good question. It depends on your motivation, right? So the one thing that we talk quite a bit during the teenager sessions is that you can relabel things. As in, literally, when you have something that is so hard, and believe me, climbing Mont Blanc is really, really challenging. It took me 3 days, right? Usually I do it in 2.5, but I was doing it alone, so I was taking my time. The fact that it was so important to me to get to that summit, I wanted to have something truly memorable for my 50th birthday. It was overriding. Like it was really, what are you trying to achieve? So it was not a problem, or the pain was there. It was really hard, but it had a big yellow sticker label saying challenge. And when you redefine things as a challenge, and you understand that this is full of purpose, and it will make your life down the line for the rest of your years more meaningful, you're capable of going much further. But if you don't have the challenge, if it's just like, why am I doing this? Like, I'm working in this office and my job is to stamp 3 pieces of paper and then give it to the boss, it's a lot more complicated. So you need to maybe rephrase that in your head, as in, the challenge here is enhancing my ability to do really boring stuff because it pays a salary that allows me to go and climb mountains. As in, it's a cost you're paying doing something boring, and that allows you. So it's a currency that you're accumulating to be able to achieve things that you deeply care about. So I have a genetic problem with my legs. So my bones, they grind, like the shape of my leg bones destroy the cartilage. So when I'm climbing Mont Blanc, I actually have a bone grinding on the other bone, and it's really painful. But that's the equivalent of working in a boring job, right? As in, I have to control that pain because the objective is so overwhelmingly positive that that pain becomes irrelevant. Of course, you don't want to do something that is going to take you to a hospital after, but I've had this for 5 years or so. Yeah, it only hurts when I walk, which is not great. And you have to be really careful, because if you're climbing and you have a weird angle on your leg, the pain can be extremely sharp. So I had to be very, very careful how I was moving, but it became background noise, right? So try to have a guiding star. And even if it's unrelated, and say, hey, I have to do the boring job because that's giving me the skills to create a startup later. Like, I need to understand all the boring stuff with someone else paying the bill, and then I can do it myself. It makes it a lot easier. Like saying, there are lots of boring things in running a company. These are things like you need to dig the fields and get the seeds, and make sure that you keep the birds and mice away. Otherwise, you don't get food, right? So I would rephrase it and try to label things challenge if they are challenges, if they're taking you in the direction you want to go.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Marcelo. Unfortunately, we are absolutely over time, so we can take one more question. Is anyone? I think Ankita had a question. Ankita, want to ask that?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. My question is like, what do you want to happen or achieve next in your life?
Well, you have this kind of crazy objective of being the oldest person in the world to do whatever. It could be climbing Everest, could be something else. The closer goal is climbing a mountain called the Matterhorn, which is in Zermatt. So there's this really beautiful triangle-shaped mountain, which is technically really difficult. As in, I would not do that alone because I'll be killing myself. So I'll go with a guide. And that is just, a natural evolution after doing Mont Blanc. Let me do something that's technically more difficult and is equally memorable. And from a career perspective, the focus is really on making teenagers wiser. And there are about 1 billion teenagers who could become wiser. I'm not in a hurry because making children wiser faster is relevant now, is going to be relevant 100 years from now. So I don't need to meet quotas or quarterly targets. It's like the more I can do, the better. So this is a long-term objective.
That sounds great. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thanks for joining.
All right, everyone. Unfortunately, we are actually beyond out of time right now. Marcelo, it's been a privilege. Thank you so much, and it's always wonderful. And I think there's a lot of learning which has happened today, and I think the biggest learning which has been for all of us, including me, is the power of the human spirit, and that if you really tell yourself you can do something, and if you can back it up, you definitely can do it. And with regards to the crazy people being in the Explorers Club, I'll see you there very soon myself. I'll catch you up over there, friend. So give me a couple of years and we'll be in the club together for sure.
Let's talk about it.
Okay, I have a small request. If we can have all cameras on in case they were off. Dhruv and Nishit, you know what you have to do. Give us a nice picture. Everyone, please smile. This goes on social media. Very, very important. All your 32 teeth, I hope you brushed them today morning. Let's do it. Are we done, guys? All right, perfect. Marcelo, thank you so much. It's been a privilege and pleasure having you over here. Is there anything you would like to, in the last maybe 60 seconds, as a last word, give to the students over here?
Let me just share. Can you run that video? It's 30 seconds. Yeah. So now you can see the summit of Mont Blanc from a drone footage. And this is the reward that I had. Beautiful day. So this is a friend of mine who went there the day before, and he had a drone, and he shared that with me. But this is a view that I had just a day later. It's really fantastic. And the final thing is just to get to my contact details. So you may want to screenshot that. And yeah, well, if you want to help teenagers become wiser faster in the future, just send me a message. And this is the reading list. You may also want to screenshot that and check it out. And that's all, folks.
Thank you so much, Marcelo. It's been a privilege and pleasure having you. It's been a wonderful way. Thank you so much for taking time off. For those of you who don't know, Marcelo is in a small lake in Switzerland called Geneva, Lake Geneva. Some of you may have heard of it by mistake. So he stays in Geneva. So next time you go off to Switzerland, you can definitely call on Marcelo. So it was definitely very early for them when he took the session with us. So thank you so much, Marcelo. And well, wish you a very, very, very good adventure. And we look forward to hearing news when you're climbing Matterhorn next. Keep us in your mind when you do that, for sure.
Oh, really. Hats off.
Bye. Take care. Bye, Marcelo. Athena, people, stay back. Any of you leaves, I'm going to kill you personally. All right. All right. Switch on the cameras.
Most of them left.
Let me stop recording first.